Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. We will get started here in a moment. We will wait for a few people to show up. We're going to talk today about essay writing using the appropriate style. Now, I've chosen this topic because a lot of people have written about how to write an essay, and so I thought I would talk about it by comparing the different essay styles very briefly. Now, if you have a question in this live that is related to essay writing, please ask it. You can go to the box with the question mark at the bottom of your screen, and I will be able to address those questions that are related to essay writing. Those that aren't related to essay writing probably will not be answered. So please try to ask your questions, the ones that are relevant. So today we're going to talk about essay writing, using appropriate styles. I understand from the questions that I've received that a lot of students and adults, it doesn't matter, people are not clear on how to distinguish between essay styles or what to say in certain essays. And so what I want to do is hopefully clear up a little bit. We can't do, obviously, in great detail. I'm going to just touch on one thing that I think is really important, and that is, well, first of all, I want us to understand the style that to use for your assigned essay that your teacher is giving you. And what I'm going to focus on is the beginning of the essay. What should the substance of the beginning be? So how to begin well, and to understand very broadly what's expected of you based on the different questions that your teachers ask you. And so this is going to be quite interesting. And what am I going to look at? I'm going to compare the structures very generally of 6 different formal writing styles or perspectives: summary, narrative or storytelling, criticism, argumentation, compare, contrast, and cause and effect. I'm going to try to explain these perhaps in a way you've never heard before. How these different writing styles, how to see them in differently, and to try to highlight the key differences between them. So this is our goal, and let's see if we can complete it. Now, in what I'm going to do in this essay, the structure is going to be interesting. I'm going to look at all 6 of these through the prism. Prism is this little glass triangle. Through the prism of one event, and it's a recent event in the United States. It's the election. And so I'm going to look at all 6 of these styles based on this one event, which is the election, the US election that happened last week between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And so we're going to look at this. This is the event we're going to look at, and we're going to analyze, or we're going to write 6 different, or start writing 6 different essay styles based on the same event, so you can understand the differences between the genres, between the questions that your teachers, or if you're the teacher, the teacher's questions that you're being asked. All right. Now, if you have any questions, I think I'm going to read them at the end, but I just want to take a look to see if there are any technical issues. If we have technical issues, then I want to address those. All right. All right, I think we're ready to go. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this event, and we're going to analyze it. So the US elections last week, and we're going to look at here, in case some of you don't know, Donald Trump's the president, and Joe Biden was the contender, and he defeated President Trump last week. These are the 2 men who were involved in the election. All right, so let's begin. We're going to begin by pretending, or let's say you're in the class and the teacher gives you one of these 4 questions. And so what you have to do is then decide how to write an essay. We're going to begin them only. How to write an essay based on these questions. So I'm going to approach this topic through the questions or assignments that your teachers ask you, because a lot of students are writing me saying, I don't know how to write an essay. I don't know what to say or how to begin. And so I'm going to give you a few very basic defining features of each of these essay types. And it's also important to note that the type of question that is asked determines the type of essay you write. Not all essays are the same because not all questions are the same. When the question's different, it requires a different response. And we call this very generally genres or types of essays. All right, so here are the 4 questions we're going to look at. What happened in the recent U.S. presidential election? What do you think about the recent U.S. presidential election? Why do you think Biden defeated Trump? And analyze why Biden defeated Trump. So we have 4 different questions. And I ask you to pay attention to this because the wording of the questions is really important to how you go about answering the question. And as you'll see, the different styles are dictated or influenced by the type of question. So let's look at the first question. What happened in the recent U.S. presidential election? What happened? When someone asks what happened, they're interested in a summary. One option is a summary. They would like a summary of it. And so here we have a summary. So here's the question. What happened in the recent U.S. election? The definition of summary essay is an account of the main points of the election in this case. So how would we write that? Let's look at an example, just a very basic example of an essay, a summary essay. Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump in the election held on the 3rd of November, 2020. He captured 75 million votes, 4 million more than President Trump. All right. Now here are the commentary is my commentary below. In a summary essay, you offer no judgment. Your opinions aren't important if you're just summarizing it. So if someone wants to know what happened, they're not asking what you think. They want to know what happened. So a summary is a shortened, we call it condensed version of the actual event or thing. So this is a shortened, a condensed. Condensed means shortened. Condensed is C-O-N-D-E-N-S-E-D, condensed. Now, why can this genre be difficult? Because you have to capture in your writing or in your speaking, it's the same, the most important aspects of an event. You have to capture the most important aspects of an event, and that can be sometimes difficult for students. All right, ask your question and then I'll come back at the end and address it. So narrative, storytelling. This is another way to answer the question, what happened in the recent U.S. presidential elections? Tell the story. Tell the narrative. A narrative means story. You narrate as the narrator. That's the noun. The person who tells the story is the narrator. By the way, that's a very difficult word to pronounce. Narrator. Narrator. Very difficult. Okay, what does this mean? It's a spoken or written account of connected events or a story. Now let's look at an example of narrative style essay. The election began on Tuesday, the 3rd of November, with President Trump holding a large lead. But over the course of the day, Biden surpassed him in key battleground states as mail-in votes were counted. So if you notice in narrative style, this is the easiest style, by the way, you tell events in a chronological order. This happened, then this happened, then this happened. And why can this genre be challenging? If it is challenging for some people, it's because you need to get the order of events correct. Because that's the basis of a narrative or a narration, is you tell events guided by time. So those are the two genres you can use when someone asks you what happened. You can summarize it, or you can tell the full story without much of a summary. All right, let's move on to the next two genres, or the next genre, and that is based on this question. What do you think about the recent presidential election? Now, you can already tell this is different from the earlier one because this one wants your thoughts, your opinions. So it's obviously different than a summary or a narrative, which they don't want your opinions necessarily, but this one very specifically does. And that might call for criticism. What do you think? Now you criticize positively or negatively. What do you think about the recent US presidential election? So the definition of a criticism or critical essay, the analysis and judgments of the merits and faults, those are positives and negatives, of something like an event or a literary or artistic work. So oftentimes you have art critics or movie critics. These are very common. But you also have political critics or pundits. Pundits is a very fancy term, Pundits, and this means experts in a particular field. A pundit is an expert in a particular field. Now, if we've been asked this question, what do you think about the election? Here is a possible example as a critical essay. I think Trump failed. Now notice that I'm giving you my thoughts straight away. This is what criticism is about. They want your ideas, your feelings, your judgments. I think Trump failed to attract enough voters in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan because he didn't campaign long enough in these states. All right. What's essential about this judgment? The judgment in a criticism must be fair, not biased. Biased is the opposite of fair. Why can this genre be difficult? You must have an opinion and you must be able to articulate it. Articulate it means write it or speak it convincingly. All right, I will get to your questions, so please ask them, and we'll get to them at the end. Why do you think Biden defeated Trump? Now we move into what is known as an argumentative essay. They want your theory, your idea. What's your theory on this? Why do you think Biden defeated Trump? So an argumentative essay is a reason or set of reasons given in support of an idea. This is the most popular academic essay. So those of you who asked about essay writing, this is the most common assignment that a teacher will give you. By the way, I want to just say before I forget, if you know anyone who could benefit from this this live, please share this live on your Instagram with your friends and let them, give them a chance to watch this later, because I will save the recording and they will be able to watch it later. So share this video if you think it will help them. All right, so let's look at an example, and the example is here. And I've underlined the main argument, my main idea, in the argumentative essay. And of course, this will go in the introduction. Trump lost the election more than Biden won it. That's my overarching idea. Here's my specific thesis or main idea or argument. Higher voter turnout, meaning more voters, for Democrats was the result of disenchantment of President Trump, with President Trump. Disenchantment means that you're not in favor of him, or you don't like him. You're disenchanted. You're unhappy with President Trump. So in other words, they were motivated more negatively against Trump than they were positively for Biden. That could be an argument as an example. Now, my commentary, the argument must be backed by evidence. And so the argumentative essay has evidence that you use. Other essays obviously can as well, but and the reason argumentative essays can be difficult is you must have an idea specific enough and evidence to be able to articulate it or argue it cogently. Cogently means clearly and logically. Cogently means, it's a fancy word for clearly and logically. All right. And then finally, analyze why Biden defeated Trump. So if the teacher wants you to analyze, now you have to do a little bit more thinking yet. And let's take a look at the compare and contrast essay. And here we note the definition of a compare and contrast. I think most of us know. It's to note what is similar and different about two or more things. What is similar or different about two or more things. Now here's an example of a compare and contrast essay. This could happen near the beginning, again, when looking at the recent US election, and notice here's where the comparison is. Biden with Trump. I'm comparing Biden with Trump and the voters. Biden appealed to low-income voters and men, while Trump attracted wealthy Americans. So that's my comparing and my contrasting. What's my commentary or my ideas on this? The comparison should be important to the core topic, so make sure that that's in play. And finally, why can this genre be difficult? Because you must compare similar things. In this case, at the top, I'm comparing what attracted the voters. That's very important, and it's a very interesting comparison. All right. We're nearly finished, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. Now we have cause and effect. Why do you think Biden defeated Trump? Well, cause and effect, the relationship between two events or things where one is the result of the other. So this happened because of this, or because of this, this happened. That is cause and effect. So how does that look in an essay? Trump's cavalier handling. Cavalier means you don't pay attention to it. You're not concerned about it very much. His cavalier handling of the coronavirus caused many votes to be cast. I forgot B, caused many voters to cast their ballot for Biden. So that's my cause and effect. Trump's attitude towards the virus, as an example. The effect, more people voted for Biden. So that's a cause and effect essay, or a sentence at least, the beginnings of an essay. You need to show, my commentary, you need to show how one event is directly affected by another. And this is where it can be difficult, because sometimes there are two events that are close in time and proximity. Proximity can mean, in this case, space, area. So there's a distance. They're close, in space and in time. But there's no real direct causal link other than those two things. So that's why it can be tricky to find a direct link between the cause and the effect. And that is the difficulty. All right, now before we get to, I think I'll look at conclusions, and then we will take your questions. These conclusions are really important. So if I want you to pay attention, because I think this is really important summaries that I've offered here. First of all, whenever you're given an assignment, read the assignment question carefully and make sure you understand the question being asked, because that will, point number 2, identify or tell you how to address the question. What type of essay should I write? What is the teacher wanting to know? Now, the easiest essay style is the narrative, the storytelling. The most difficult is anything that involves analysis. This is the most difficult. You have to think more deeply. You don't just say this happened, but you have to ask why it happened, or see patterns in events and discuss theories, perhaps. And then the second part of the summary, equally important, in general, this is interesting, the more analytical the task, the more specific the question. So if the question is very general, it might require a general summary or narration or some sort. If it's specific, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, it might ask for more analysis. And then finally, the argumentative essay, where you're trying to prove or make one point, is a standard academic essay. So you want to argue one point, and you have everything below it is supporting that one main idea. So this argumentative essay is the standard in academic writing in the West, and features of, or aspects or characteristics of the argumentative essay can be found in other types of formal essays. In other words, a lot of them, compare and contrast or cause and effect, oftentimes ask you to make an overall argument or main point. And that is the core or the essence of the argumentative essay. Now, before we go to questions, I just want to say that I have discussed this in different ways earlier. I have a short video and a long IGTV that discuss these topics in a different way. And I think they will really help you if you're really interested and still unclear about essays. I compare three genres in a very different way from today, in a short video and in a longer video. And please look at those. They're on my account, and they're next to each other, so you'll be able to see them. Let's look at questions. All right, this is... All right. Okay, let's go to some specific questions about that students are asking, or people are asking. How many parts should be written? This depends on how long the assignment is, but in general, you want your essay divided into paragraphs, and each paragraph makes a small point that supports the main point. And generally, paragraphs are 4, 5, 6 sentences. This is the most common length of a paragraph, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences. They can be longer or shorter, but that's the average. Okay, let's take a look at more. Great. This is a very interesting question. How can we combine criticism and idea into the same paragraph, or should we separate them? I don't know what you mean by idea, but in general, you want to make one point per paragraph. If you start to make more than 1 point in a paragraph, it becomes more difficult to execute successfully. So try to make 1 point per paragraph. So you can compare two things, but you make one comparative point. So you can compare two things, but you're making 1 point about that comparison. I hope that makes sense. That's a very good question. All right, I'm looking for other questions. All right, this is a good one. That's right. I didn't actually talk about the format of an essay, which I assumed you all knew, but let's take a look. There are 3 basic parts. You have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Now, the introduction, how you write the introduction depends on how long the essay is, and whether you have extra or outside sources, books, articles, electronic sources, or websites. If you're using other people's ideas, and incorporating them into your essay, then this will require a longer introduction because you have to talk a little bit about your sources and why your essay, how your essay is going to use the sources and how your essay is different from the sources. So the more sources you use, or if you use sources other than your own brain and common general knowledge, but if you're using official sources and you have a bibliography at the end, then you have to have a longer introduction to talk about these sources in relation to your essay. Very good question. The essay length, the question is about essay length. The essay should be as long, well, ultimately the teacher decides, but in fact the question can also determine the length of the essay. So you have to answer the question convincingly or completely. So the broader the question, the more difficult it is to answer in a short space. That's why you want a more narrow question, or narrower question, if you want to answer it in a short space. All right, this is interesting. How to conclude an essay. What do you write in the conclusion? There are many theories on conclusions, and maybe we can do a live on conclusions. I love conclusions because it's an opportunity to restate what you did differently. So if you notice in my conclusion, let's just take a look at, I wrote 2 slides of conclusion. None of what I wrote in my conclusion is exactly what I wrote in the introduction or during the presentation. It's different. And so the conclusion gives you an opportunity to express your ideas from a different perspective with the hope that the listeners or the students will understand it. It's my last chance to get my message across. Now, I can do that 2 ways. I can repeat what I said earlier, but I find that less effective. I think more effective is to rephrase it, say it differently, in hopes that someone will say, oh, now I get it, now I understand. So I try to write it or express my main ideas slightly differently, slightly in a different manner than the way I presented it initially. All right, this is an interesting question. Someone says, why is it wrong to start our essay with a question? Well, it depends on the style. A lot of interesting articles or essays can begin with a rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is a question that requires no answer, but indicates a direction that you want to go in the essay. So, in fact, rhetorical questions are quite common in essays, especially at the beginning, although it doesn't have to be at the beginning. All right. This is very good. What about the thesis statement? First of all, a thesis statement is the main idea. It's the most important sentence in your essay. It's the most important sentence in your essay because that's the sentence that I judge the merits of all of your evidence and how whether you argue it logically or not. The thesis statement is your main idea. It belongs in the introduction, somewhere in the introduction. It can be actually written anywhere in the introduction. It can be restated in the conclusion, but it must be in the introduction. This is interesting. Is a book or a movie or book review also an essay? Yes, it is. It's called a review essay. A review essay. It's a genre, it's a style that's very popular. I write review essays a lot, and I really enjoy writing them. All right, this is interesting question. I heard we should start our essay with a hook. This is a hook. If you go fishing, you have a hook that you hook the fish with. And in the same way, we try to hook the reader with something interesting. So my idea with this is very broad, and it's the following. Your hook, or how you begin the essay, which I've not talked about that today. I talked about the essential, what's the core of the different genres, what's essential about each, different from each of the genres. But in terms of how you start the essay, how you hook the reader, I think there are several interesting ways. A rhetorical question is interesting. A quotation can be interesting if it relates to your main idea. Interesting facts. A story, we call it an anecdote, that somehow leads us to your main idea. So here's my general thoughts on an introduction. If you have thought about it and it's interest and it links to your main idea, and there's an interesting link between whatever you're doing in the main idea, it's probably going to be an interesting or a good introduction. That's a very general statement. But the point is, if you've thought about it and whatever you write in the beginning is related in a very clever way or a logical way, in the ways I've mentioned earlier, with data, with facts, with quotes, with a question, if it's directly related to your main idea, then it's probably going to be an interesting hook or introduction. Very good question. All right, a few more questions here. All right, someone says, is it correct we must end our essay with an open-ended question? Not necessarily, but in the conclusion, if you want to address a few questions that sort of further our thinking about the topic, so you've talked about a topic, you've argued one idea, in the conclusion, if you want to say, but we haven't talked about this or this, and that's interesting as well to analyze, that's sort of an open-ended question that gives readers direction on where to read or where to do research further. So those open-ended questions are basically designed to help the reader, not to help anyone else. It lets the reader, because you're the expert, you're writing, you tell the reader different areas or avenues or directions they can look on this topic. And I think it's a good practice. But I don't think you have to do it. Although if your teacher says you have to, then you have to. All right, this is a great question. And it's one that's elusive. Elusive is difficult to grab. If something's elusive, you can't quite catch it. So squirrels are elusive because they go under the ground very quickly, or they go up trees actually very quickly. So squirrels are elusive. And critical thinking is difficult to sort of define and show, but I will try. Critical thinking involves looking at something and drawing comparisons, trying to come up with a theory or a reason why something happened. So you're trying to make sense of the world in a very logical, theoretical system that we sort of devise or make in our own mind. That is critical thinking. The more you do it, the better you get. In the beginning, your critical thinking won't be very interesting. But the more you do it, the more you see more interesting ideas and more plausible theories. Plausible means believable or credible or logical. So critical thinking involves analyzing, looking at two things and trying to find a relationship between them. Non-critical thinking is this. You just look at something and you say, oh, this happened, then this happened, then this happened. You're just reporting something. You're not trying to analyze why. You're not trying to answer the question why or how. So if you want to know basically, if you want to do critical thinking, start to answer questions like why and how. Not what, but why and how. And you will begin to improve your critical thinking. All right, let's look at another one. These are good questions. All right, I'm not going to answer IELTS questions because it's slightly different. Although I'm happy to look at IELTS questions at another time. An appropriate style is generally, I'm talking about formal writing styles. All of these are basically formal, so we expect you to adopt a formal style, which means that you don't use slang or informal expressions. So you opt for more formal uses of the language. If you're not sure what that means, then you have to just look up words. And in nice dictionaries, they'll have the word INF, or abbreviation INF, which means informal. So good dictionaries will tell you if a word is informal. If it's not, then you can use it. Thank you very much. Kadam, thank you. Kadam 10. Conjunctions, all right. Okay, very good. I assume by condensing, you mean paraphrasing. Yeah, if you condense something, it literally means to shorten it. You shorten it in two ways, summarizing or paraphrasing. Summarizing is putting it in very brief terms. Paraphrasing is rewriting one line for one line. So you paraphrase a quote, the quote is 4 lines, the paraphrase is also 4 lines. But if you summarize, the quote is 4 lines and the summary is 1. So you see the difference is in proportion. All right. Thank you so much, Sherry. That's very nice. All right. All right, yes. If you have questions that aren't answered, you can ask me directly in a direct message. Okay, someone has asked, thank you, Marion, have I written anything about essay writing? I haven't as such. I'm thinking about it though, because I have a lot of things to say. But I have written articles. So I've written quite a bit. So if you want to see that, you can find it on academia.org, I think. But edu, academia, edu, my name. And you'll see there in PDF, you can read some of my historical articles or a book. Most of it's there. All right, let's take a look at... Some of these are too small. I actually can't read it. I'm very sorry. They're really small writing. All right. Somebody's asked a very good question. I can't answer this very well. How to conclude the paragraph in the body while writing an argumentative essay. I mean, at the end of a paragraph, first of all, the paragraph is making one point that supports the main idea. At the end of that paragraph, it still should support the idea in the paragraph, but at the very end, you should also be looking at the next paragraph and its idea. So ideally, the end of a paragraph also nicely transitions to the new paragraph and the new idea. How you do this varies a lot, and we could talk about it in the future. I actually have an early live on that, but I'm not sure it's recorded. It will be, if it is recorded, it's the first or second live I ever did. And we can talk about it again. Presidential. Someone asked about presidential. All right, Nora Rodriguez. Thank you. You've asked a question. I think I've answered it. If I haven't, then you can write me again in a private message. There will be a lesson on Saturday. There's a pronunciation class. If any of you want to attend, please do. The pronunciation class will be held on Saturday, and I will announce that again. Okay. All right, I think we're nearly finished. If I did not get to your question, Okay, this is a nice one. What is a descriptive essay? A descriptive essay is exactly as it says. It's a description. So it's a little bit like storytelling. You're describing something in detail. There's no main argument. It's not an argumentative essay. You're just describing something. So whereas in a story or a narrative, you go along by time, in description, it doesn't necessarily, you're not measured by time. You're just describing things. You can do it by location. You can do it by events or time, but descriptive essays have much more flexibility on how you structure the essay. But it doesn't require a lot of analysis. It requires observations. You observe and you write what you see. This is a descriptive essay. Very good question. All right, one person has asked a very interesting question. Thank you for this, Sankar. Is there any formal way of writing an academic essay? Can we add examples? So I want to talk about examples. The more vivid and specific the examples you use are, the more convincing your argument is, and the more interesting your essay or talk is. Let me say it again. Your examples will indicate oftentimes how interesting your essay is. The more specific the essay, the more specific the example, and the more detailed the example is, the more interesting the essay or the speech is to read or to listen to. And that's a general thing. So examples are crucial, not only to making your argument, but to providing an interesting essay or speech for the students and listeners. All right, do I have a specific scheme? Someone's asked, do I have a specific scheme for an essay? It depends on the genre. And of course, we didn't have time to go in detail with all 6. But in general, all essays have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Now, descriptive essays and narratives, storytelling, might not have very strict structures of parts, intro, body, and end, because they don't really require it. But other essay styles, formal essay styles, do require it. So it depends on the style. I've answered as descriptive styles. All right. I think we're finished. If I did not get to your question, then you can write me a direct message. I just want to say thank you all for a very good meeting today. I hope it was interesting. I hope it was informative. And join me next Wednesday. Here's the last slide. Join me next Wednesday, the same time, different topic. And for many of you, I will see you on Saturday for the pronunciation class. Have a great evening or afternoon or night, and I will see you Saturday or Wednesday. Bye-bye.